Welcome to the Set in Stone podcast, the podcast that aims to educate people about the statues in the North East and their histories. I'm Kate, and on today's episode we have Decs.
Hey everyone.
So, how are you this morning, Decs? It's freezing, and it's Friday, so hopefully the weekend will be fun and not full of essays.
Yeah, I'm glad to be inside. I'm far too cold, and I'm ready for the weekend. I plan to just sleep it through.
That sounds amazing. I'm very jealous. So in today's episode, we'll be talking about the Spirit of Jarrow, which is a statue in Jarrow. It's outside the Morrisons, and it is a life-size bronze statue to commemorate the 65th anniversary of the Jarrow Marchers. It has two men holding a life-size banner. You will see, I will be putting a photo up on screen. And as you can see, there will be two men holding a life-size banner saying the Jarrow Crusades, along with two children and a woman holding a baby and a dog. The dog is the mascot for the Jarrow Marchers.
I do like that the dog's there. It's not only is it historically accurate, it's just cute.
It is very cute. I went to go and visit it, and it is adorable.
I was very surprised to know that there was actually a dog at the marches. You know, it was a stray. It wasn't anybody's.
I did not know that.
No,
that's really interesting.
It was a stray dog that they found in the marches, and it just went with them.
That's adorable. That's honestly adorable. To continue talking about the statue, they're walking out of a shipwreck, and this is to commemorate the Jarrow Marchers. But what are the Jarrow Marchers? I hear you say. I don't know if you're saying that, but I'm guessing you are. Dex, what do you know about the Jarrow Marchers?
I know the very, very basics of the actual event itself. The Jarrow Marches had 200 people involved, and it was all to do with gaining employment in the Northeast in 1936, at a time where unemployment was at an all-time high. 200 people marched down from Jarrow to London to campaign to return industry to Jarrow. Honestly, Kate, that's about the extent of the specifics of the event that I know that aren't quite negative. I'm sure you can tell us more.
To be fair, that is pretty much the whole basics of it. So the Jarrow Marches were because of unemployment, as you've said, happening in not just in the Northeast, but particularly in the Northeast. And Jarrow was particularly known for shipbuilding, and the government decided to close down Palmer's shipyard because of foreign exports essentially being cheaper. So shipbuilding industry witnessed a closure of 36 shipbuilders from 1920 to 1923, while the Northeast built 81.7% of the world's ships in 1892, and in 1934 it fallen to 6.8%.
I think the timing couldn't be worse. Given that World War II was right around the corner, and a navy was pretty important for that.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's why. And Palmersfield was the main employment in Jarrow, and half of the people, really, in Jarrow lost their jobs. This was devastating to the community, and the MP, Ellen Wilkinson, she tried to get steel industry in to help raise the jobs, but the steel industry blocked that. So the government had closed down this main employment of this town that was built on shipbuilding, and then given them no alternatives. And they were not happy. I wouldn't be happy. It's a bit annoying. Lost my job, lost everything. So they decided to march down to London to basically raise the issue of unemployment. Fun fact, though, this actually wasn't just one march. It was part of many other marches. So people think it's just the Jarrow March that did this, but actually it was only the last march in a series of marches that decided to march down to London, which I did not know.
Neither did I. I thought the Jarrow Marchers was its own little confined campaign. I knew there were campaigns before and after, but I didn't realise it joined with others. another thing I want to point out, which I think is pretty impressive, Ellen Wilkinson, she was a Labour MP. She was one of the only female members of Parliament at the time. And I think this is a pretty significant topic she's covering, which I think shows that throughout time, gender roles in politics were slowly improving. Obviously, it's not as good as it should be at this point, but it is getting there.
Yes, definitely. Not only, I think it's important to remember that not only was the shipyard closed, they weren't allowed steel industry, they were also barred from the government for 40 years for building any other ships. So they were not even given any alternative. They can't even open another shipyard. It was just like, nope, not doing this. On October 1936, at 10:30 a.m., Ellen Wilkinson, the MP, and the Mayor Thompson set off from Christchurch to London. And it took a while to get down there.
I'm not much of a walker. I hate to say, I will walk around Newcastle. I won't walk much further. I just wouldn't dream of going from Jarrow all the way down to London. It sounds like nothing but a pain.
Yeah, it was. I remember when I first said I was going to do the Jarrow Marchers, and Decs here was like, oh, you can recreate the Jarrow Marchers. Like, no, Decs, I don't think I have the time.
Right, in my defence.
No, because he forgot that I wasn't just walking to Jarrow, I would be walking right down from Jarrow to London. And I was like, no, Decs, that's going to take me a good 24 days.
Look, I'm really bad at geography. What can I say? I'm sorry.
No, you just got the basic facts of what this march was.
I mean, at that point, I didn't know anything about Jarrow, so this was an education for me as well as the viewers.
That is great to hear. This march has left an unbelievable mark on Jarrow. It is literally a living memory to the Jarrow Marchers. Not only is there this statue, the Spirit of Jarrow, there's also statues at the Metro. There's other statues throughout the town centre. There's also streets named after some of the male marchers that went, and you've got Town Hall named after Wilkinson, their MP. The impact it has left on this town is honestly insurmountable. It is going to Jarrow. You can see how much this march has meant to the people. So it would be very confusing if there was any controversies, because, we've got to talk about the controversies of our statues. It's never just a simple yes or no. There's lots of controversies in it. So, Decs, is there any controversies with the Jarrow Marchers or the Spirit of Jarrow?
Yeah, so personally, the controversies behind statues are why I'm here. I think they're the most fun to cover. And I was really excited to get into the Spirit of Jarrow and look at what protests there might have been or financial problems, and I just couldn't find anything.
That's good. That's good. I think that proves again just how important this march is to the people. It
seems like it was loved from the moment it was conceptualized, which, like you say, in a statue and for a memory of an event is very important. But there was one case of vandalism I did find.
That's shocking.
It is, especially because it wasn't. It didn't seem random to me. All of the eyes of the people, including the children, and I think the dog as well, had paint coming from its eyes as if everyone was crying.
That's a bit bizarre, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I was doing some digging to try to find out why this vandalism occurred. Because again, it seems a bit too specific, and I decided to look at the history of the Jarrow Marches to answer this question because I couldn't find the actual answer. And in simple terms, I think it's because the Jarrow Marches was nothing but a failure.
That's a strong statement. That is a very, very strong statement to make. Why do you think it's such a failure?
Well, starting off with the 200 people that went.
Can we just clarify that it was men? It's not people, it was men. Only men were allowed to go on this walk. Like, no women. The only woman that was allowed was Ellen. She was the only woman allowed, and she didn't even do the whole walk.
There wasn't even children there. So the fact that they are representing women and children on the walk is historically wrong. The most historically accurate thing there is the men and the dog.
The banner.
Oh, and the
banner is an exact replica of what the actual banner was. So
that's pretty impressive, actually. That I didn't know.
Yeah, do you not know that?
I didn't know that.
If you look at photos of the actual Jarrow March, it's the same banner.
Okay, that's pretty impressive.
It's really cool.
I'll give the statue some credit for that. But no, the march itself was limited to 200 people, and this was specifically to ensure that everybody could be fed, which for people that are unemployed walking all that distance is very important. There was a 6-year-old man from Jarrow that was disallowed to go on the march for his age and because of the limitation of people that could go. And I've got a rather interesting quote from him, and I begin, open quote, "I have suffered hardships for years. Rain and cold and wind on the way will mean nothing to me after that. I have suffered all that a man may suffer. Nothing that can happen on the road between here and London can be worse." End quote. And unfortunately, in a bit of irony, he wasn't allowed on the march, and he died before the marchers could return.
Oh, that's really sad. That's
he
really
died
sad.
still unemployed and poor. And just hearing the passion that for wanting to go onto the march as well is awful. And I think it shows the limitation of manpower that the marches had.
Yeah, I know that actually, although only 200 men went on the march, actually 1,200 men applied to be on it. So that's a lot of cut down. That isn't that like less like that's a
It's a lot of
quick maths.
It's a lot of potential support that could have really helped their cause.
Oh, definitely. That impact of like 200 men is a lot, but over 1,000, that's a lot. That's I can't even picture that.
I think the Jarrow Marchers as well, the campaign has this theme of just undercutting its support. For example, it didn't appeal for a campaign within trade unions to help the Jarrow Marches. Instead, it wanted a cross-class movement, which on the surface seems like a smart idea, right? It sent Conservatives and Labour Party representatives ahead of the march to greet mayors, officials, journalists, and the people of all the towns and villages.
Really good. Like that's I didn't know that. That's really good to like have cross-party politics, and it shows the importance of the march.
Yeah, and it's getting everybody involved from every economic background, which I think is very important. But in doing so, they failed to involve the trade unions, and it is the point of trade unions to deal with issues such as unemployment. So I think negating any aid from them is well proved to be dangerous.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Yes.
Though, and this is another point of the Jarrow Marches. It was very well organised. I've got a quote here from Ellen Wilkinson that states, and open quotes, "With the blessing of bishops, priests and clergy, subscriptions from businessmen, the paternal interest of the Rotary Club, and the unanimous vote of the town council, could anything have been more constitutional?" End quote. And this quote, to me, shows how properly structured the march was. It did everything right. It didn't... It didn't go into riots. It didn't choose violence. It chose peace, and it chose peace via actual political norms. But it was still wasn't enough. The message of the Jarrow Marches were very watered down by methods used, and it had very limited demands for unspecific aid for the unemployed, and it failed to criticise decisions made by the government and bank involving industry. In the short term, the marchers failed to reverse the decision of the government and bank that blocked loans that would have been used to open steelworks in Jarrow. The steelworks, of course, as you mentioned before, the shipwrights being closed for 40 years, the steelworks would come in to replace them.
Yeah.
And relations between the government and large businesses remained under tensions after the Jarrow Marches. And just all this combined, it feels like the government didn't take the marches seriously.
It's almost like the Northeast, like the government doesn't care about the Northeast. It's almost like they don't care about Northerners.
You say I have a bold statement in saying the Jarrow Marches failed, but that's another can of worms, Kate.
I think that's just a fact at this point.
I can't remember the figure on top of my head, but I think the petition I've had, I think it was 12,000 signatures.
Yeah, it's 12,000 signatures.
There was a lot of people that had support for this course, and the government just did not take it properly. And I would honestly blame that on these almost cut corners from the Jarrow Marchers campaign, this lack of trade unions, the unspecific demands. I would have made it very, very clear. I would have properly criticised the government for the closing of the shipwrights, properly criticised the Bank of England for the refusal of loans. And one final thing I want to comment on, and one thing I was surprised of when you told me that there was parts of a ship in the statue. I thought this is in 1936.
Yeah, it's in 1936.
The shipbuilding industry was pretty good at this point. Of course, in Jarrow, they weren't. They closed. But on a whole, the shipbuilding industry was pretty big. But I also wanted to link, in my own sort of headcanon of this statue, I think it also links to the Save Our Shipyards campaign in 1983 and 1984. Yeah. Which was to keep shipyards open when there was going to be a mass closure. Another campaign that failed. And I hate to be the negative one here, but...
You hate to be a negative Nancy.
I hate to be the negative Nancy, but Kate, I just can't help but see the Jarrow Marchers as nothing but a failure. In the short term, it did nothing.
Yeah, I think that's really important to mention, is that when they got down to London, they'd done this 24-day walk. They're knackered. They are carrying the petition with them the whole way. They carry the petition in like a box the whole way from Jarrow to London. Parliament refused to see them.
Yeah.
Parliament fundamentally go, no, we're not seeing you. I think a few get like in contact with the Prime Minister at the time.
It's just not enough though, is it?
But nothing happens. They get sent away. They get put on a train back to Jarrow.
I think that's the sad irony as well. And you'd think after walking for 24 days, yeah, train back is the way to go. But it almost seems like a sign of the defeat. Hop on a train, go back home, get a hero's welcome. But nothing came of it, really.
Yeah, and the actual metro station where you get off to get into Jarrow is an old train station, actually. So to know that is most likely the train station they got off, where they got nothing. They got nothing. Ellen Wilkinson actually did write a book about the fail of the government to help, and it really stayed with her that nothing really came about of this. And I think that proves your point of how little it actually did do. And talking about how little it did, I found some fun controversies. In the 1960s, there was a lot of like conversations around the Jarrow March of how it should sort of be forgotten, because most people like you, Decs, thought it was a failure and thought you can't keep living in the past. You can't keep talking about how it did all these things. And Matt Perry talks about this in his book, The Jarrow Crusade Protest and Legend, and how people actively tried to forget it. They told people, do not remember this. It did nothing. You can't keep living in the past. And now it's shocking to know now what Jarrow is going to see it and how it is just a memorial to the Jarrow Crusade. There is nothing there.
And I think it's also, I'm in a weird in-between with that, because it seems like the entire history of Jarrow is basically this point in time. And I think just completely forgetting this event is particularly dangerous. But there's also that part of me that agrees. I don't see the point in commemorating a failure.
Yeah. Do you know how much it is commemorated? Matt Perry found that this is all the things that are commemorated Jarrow Marchers. 5 plays, 2 musicals and an opera, 3 pop songs, 2 folk songs, several paintings and poems, a short story, performance art, a mural, 2 sculptures, glassware, 4 television documentaries, 3 British and 1 German one, 4 radio programmes, a children's story, a cuddly toy, a real ale, a public house, an election poster, street names, and innumerable pieces of journalism historical references on the course of hundreds of often reproduced photographs. This is how much this is remembered for something that essentially did nothing.
The 2 that stand out to me are the cuddly toy and the fact that it's international in that. What was it? A German article?
There's a German documentary on this.
A German documentary. That's wild. I wouldn't think. Why would Germany pay attention to it?
It's the real ale for me. But yeah, so that's covered the Jarrow Marchers. But we've got to ask the ever proposing question: should this statue be set in stone? Dex, I'll let you start because I think I know your answer. I think all the viewers. Know your answer.
At the risk of making a lot of people in Jarrow angry, I don't think it should be. I don't think the Spirit of Jarrow should ever have been erected. I just don't, like I said previously, I don't see the value in remembering a failure. I completely agree with the notion that they should just move on. I can see the positives with the marches, this community that they built around it, and this mass support. It shows what a community can do, but at the same time, no, it doesn't, because it led to nothing. It failed, and Jarrow remained poor and unemployed.
And Jarrow is still poor. I think that's something to mention. And you just have to go to the city, like the town centre, to know Jarrow is severely, like not well off. It is still suffering from the closures of these shipyards, and nothing's happened to help them. And I think that is very sad.
Well, I've got a little bit of a smirk because I've got the feeling you share the same opinion as me. Maybe it's not as bad as I thought.
Well, I do understand that Jarrow's march maybe didn't do great for its cause. But I think when Graham Ibsen, who created the Spirit of Jarrow, he didn't name it. 2 locals actually did name it. When Morrison's asked him to commission this, I don't think he has wasted his time. I think Jarrow Marchers fundamentally represents community and coming together. And that is so strong in Jarrow. I got lost trying to find the Spirit of Jarrow. I was walking around with my boyfriend, shout out to Sam, nearly having a fight because we could not find this on Google Maps. And a lady asked us, "Oh, what are you looking for?" And I said, "Oh, the Jarrow March statue." Straight away knew where it was. Straight away.
That's pretty impressive.
And although when going to it, not many people actually were interacting with the Spirit of Jarrow. It's outside of Morrison's. Most people were buying food.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think just really hinders the statue. Outside of Morrison's, it doesn't seem significant at all. Unlike previously, we've covered the Angel of the North, which was welcoming you into Gateshead. This is outside of a Morrison's. It doesn't sound like an important location.
But I think that's part of it, is that Jarrow March is well important. I think now is more about the memory of community. It's more about people coming together to fight something that is an injustice. It didn't do much. And I think that'd be naive to think it did do a lot. It didn't. But the community spirit that's around it and the memory is so strong in Jarrow that I do think it should be commemorated. Maybe not to the extent, because an opera is a lot.
How do you even make an opera about it?
You can make an opera about anything.
That's true, actually. I do respect the ideas that it brings to the table, this idea of, community. I can absolutely respect it, and I do see why people would want the statue to be there in the first place.
So ultimately, I think it should be set in stone. I think it should be there because it shows the memory of community, and the history of memory and the history of community is vital, and it should be there. And it is something that brings together, knowing that children will walk past this going to Morrison's, remembering people that fought for them. I think it's important. It's not a World War II statue. It's not a World War One where people are fighting elsewhere, which is crucial. It's fighting for your community to be back together. And ultimately, I think it should be there.
Yeah, I think the analogy of it's a perfect representation of heroes without capes. They're not soldiers. They are your average Joe, but they're fighting just as hard. I do see the importance in that.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's quite a sad note to end on.
It is.
But I've really enjoyed this episode. I think it's going to be one of our longer ones, because we like to talk.
Yeah, this was a lot more freeform this time around.
Yeah. But I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Write down in the comments who you believe in. Believe is right, or if there's a middle ground, whether that's Decs, who is wrong, or it's me, who's pretty much always right. I've been Kate.
I've been Decs.
And thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope to get you to listen to our next episode, and have a lovely rest of your day or evening or week.
We will see you all later.
Bye.